From the outside, it looked like a dream. Pippa Middleton, once known as the elegant sister who nearly stole the show at a royal wedding, had seemingly found her own fairy tale ending. No scandals, no mess, just grace, glamour, and a picture-perfect marriage to James Matthews, a wealthy financier with an aristocratic background. But fairy tales are often just that, stories. And behind the polished photos and curated public appearances, something else was unfolding. The woman who once commanded headlines with her poise and beauty began to fade from the spotlight, reappearing now and then, noticeably alone. Whispers turned to questions, then questions turned to rumors. Where was James? Why wasn't he attending events with her anymore? And most importantly, was the perfect marriage beginning to crack? This story isn't just about a socialite and a hedge fund manager. It's about what happens when a relationship is built under the eyes of the world, where every smile is analyzed, every absence magnified, and every silence interpreted as a scream. This isn't a tale of dramatic betrayal or scandalous secrets. It's something quieter, something that's harder to talk about. It's about pressure, expectation, and what happens when love meets the relentless weight of public scrutiny. Because sometimes the real story isn't in the headlines, it's in the spaces between them. And as the spotlight slowly shifts back to Pippa Middleton, we're beginning to see that the truth behind her marriage to James Matthews is far more complicated than anyone ever imagined. Long before the tabloids called her the world's most eligible bachelorette, Pippa Middleton was simply known as Kate's sister. But in April 2011, one moment changed everything. As she stepped into Westminster Abbey wearing a fitted ivory gown, the world shifted its gaze. Her role as maid of honor at the royal wedding launched her into instant stardom. The dress, the posture, the confidence. Suddenly, Pippa was more than just a sibling. She was a sensation. But what most people didn't realize is that fame was never her goal. Raised in a hard-working, middle-class family in Berkshire, Pippa had ambition, discipline, and drive. Her parents, Michael and Carol, built a successful party-planning business from the ground up, and they passed that entrepreneurial spirit on to their children. Pippa excelled at sports, studied English literature at the University of Edinburgh, and had dreams of success, just not the kind that came from flashing cameras. Still, once fame arrived, she made the most of it. She wrote a party planning book, attended fashion shows, and became a regular on the London social scene. But there was always an edge to it, a constant reminder that she was being watched, her outfits dissected, her dates critiqued, her identity tied to her sister's royal life. The more she tried to step into her own spotlight, the longer her sister's shadow grew. And yet, Pippa pushed forward. She wasn't content to be a side character in someone else's story. She wanted to be known on her own terms. But the world wouldn't make that easy. Before James Matthews, there were others. Pippa's early relationships were fodder for the press, but they rarely offered the full picture. One of her most public romances was with Alex Loudon, a former cricket player turned banker. For a while, they seemed like the ideal match, but the pressures of fame and constant media attention became too much. Whispers of long-distance strain and public scrutiny haunted the relationship, and it eventually ended. Then came Nico Jackson, a charismatic stockbroker with a polished smile and the kind of resume the tabloids loved. Again, things looked promising. Engagement rumors swirled, but as with her past relationship, distance got in the way. He was in Geneva, she was in London, and love couldn't bridge the gap. And all this time, there was James. They had met years earlier in St. Bart's, at Eden Rock, the luxury resort owned by his family. James wasn't flashy, he wasn't constantly in the press, but he had something that Pippa needed: stability, quiet, consistent attention, a presence that didn't demand the spotlight, but stood firm in it. When Pippa found herself single again, James was there, not as a headline, but as a constant. By 2016, they made it official. 1 year later, they were married. To many, it felt like the perfect match, the socialite and the financier. The media dubbed him her Prince Charming, but what they missed was the foundation. Years of quiet connection, a shared understanding away from public noise. Still, even the strongest foundations can begin to shift under the weight of public expectation. James Matthews had once raced cars professionally. He won titles, made headlines in sports magazines, and built a fortune in finance after his retirement from racing. But he was never drawn to fame the way others might be. After all, his family valued privacy. No red carpets, no press interviews, no social media spectacles. Pippa, on the other hand, had grown accustomed to public life. Whether she wanted it or not, she had learned how to live in it, attend the event, flash the smile, give just enough charm to keep the press at bay but still interested. She wasn't chasing fame, she was managing it. When they married in 2017, their differences didn't seem like a problem. In fact, They appeared to complement each other. He was the calm to her charisma, the silence to her speech. But over time, the imbalance began to show. James avoided the limelight. Pippa thrived in it. She wrote, appeared on panels, supported charities, and posed for magazine spreads. Meanwhile, James remained in the background, often absent from events that once saw them side by side. It wasn't just about appearances, it was about priorities. Where James saw peace and privacy, Pippa saw purpose in engagement. They weren't clashing, they were drifting, quietly, without drama, but unmistakably. And while Pippa tried to keep up the image of a perfect marriage, the silence between them began to speak louder than any tabloid headline. The cracks were forming, not loudly, not messily, but undeniably. For Pippa, the expectations didn't begin with the press. They began at home. In the Middleton household, success wasn't optional. It was expected. Image, presentation, behavior, everything had to be flawless. Pippa wasn't just trying to live her life. She was trying to live up to a legacy she never asked for. Being the middle child came with its own challenges. Always looking up to an older sister who was now royalty. Always being reminded of who came before. When Kate married Prince William, it didn't just shift the royal family. It shifted Pippa's entire identity. Her attempts to carve out a space of her own became more desperate. She wrote books, launched wellness projects, and became a fixture at upper-class events. But to the world, she was still just Kate's sister. Every success came with an asterisk. Every headline had a shadow. And when she married James, the performance intensified. Their wedding was covered like a royal event. Every photo had to sparkle. Every appearance had to signal happiness. But behind that pressure was exhaustion. Not the kind you speak about, but the kind you carry quietly. The kind that whispers, "You're still not enough." And so she smiled. She posed. She tried harder. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was acting in a play written by someone else. And the more she tried to perfect the role, the more she lost sight of the life she once hoped to build. At first, no one really noticed. Maybe James missed a charity gala. Maybe Pippa showed up alone to a dinner where he was expected. It didn't raise alarms. It just seemed like scheduling conflicts. But then it kept happening. Photos of Pippa began to shift. The glow that once made headlines was now replaced with something more subdued. Her posture remained poised, her outfits flawless, but something about her eyes seemed distant. Her smile, once effortless, began to look rehearsed. And most telling of all, James was nowhere to be seen. People whispered. The tabloids speculated. Was their marriage in trouble? Was James avoiding the spotlight or avoiding her? It didn't help that whenever Pippa was seen in public, she was alone. Even after giving birth, she made appearances solo. No husband at her side. No casual hand-holding. No public unity. Insiders began to leak whispers of tension. Missed holidays, cold silences, small arguments that turned into weeks of avoidance. The couple who once seemed so balanced had grown quiet, and that silence was louder than any scandal. In interviews, Pippa's tone changed. The charm remained, but it didn't sparkle. She sounded like someone holding something back, someone trying too hard to seem fine. To the public, she remained the composed socialite, but behind closed doors, the cracks were spreading. Not because of some dramatic betrayal, but because the connection that once made them inseparable had quietly begun to fade. And as the distance grew, so did the loneliness. Behind every quiet marriage struggle is often an even quieter tension. One that doesn't come from the couple, but from the families watching from the sidelines. From the start, James's family had been a reserved force, wealthy, well-connected, and fiercely private. The Matthews were not fans of public life. They had their own way of doing things, discreetly, with dignity, and out of the spotlight. So when Pippa came into the picture with her tabloid history and headline presence, they tolerated it, but barely. The tension was subtle, a cool comment here, a missed invitation there. Nothing loud, nothing direct, just a lingering sense that she didn't quite fit. One figure stood out in the family dynamic. Vogue Williams, Pippa's sister-in-law, interviews with Vogue often contained backhanded compliments and jokes that didn't feel like jokes. Rumors circulated that Vogue wasn't even invited to Pippa and James's wedding. Whether true or not, the message was clear. This was not a warm welcome. To the Matthews family, Pippa wasn't just James's wife. She was a variable, a complication. Her public appearances, her party planning books, her attempts to be more than Kate's sister, it all looked like attention-seeking to them. And in their world, attention was a liability. The lack of acceptance began to wear on Pippa. She had worked so hard to find stability responsibility to build a family of her own. But here she was again, on the outside of a circle she desperately wanted to belong to. And in a marriage already straining under public pressure, that kind of family friction was just another crack in the foundation. When the whispers turned into headlines, Pippa and James made one last push. They weren't ready to give up. Not yet. Not after everything. They returned to where it all began. Not in the glamour of high society, but in shared purpose. The couple began appearing at charity events again. Not the flashy ones, but those tied to meaningful causes. Together, they supported the Michael Matthews Foundation, honoring James's late brother. They showed up for the Mary Hare School, which helps deaf children. It felt sincere. It felt hopeful. For a moment, the photos changed. Their smiles looked genuine, their gestures softer. It seemed like the couple had found a way back. But behind the scenes, it wasn't that simple. Those moments, though heartwarming, felt more like echoes of something lost than the revival of something alive. Their connections seemed curated, the affection polished, not spontaneous. Friends close to the couple began to sense the truth, that what remained between them wasn't passion, but responsibility. There was no scandal, no explosive fight, just a quiet realization that the spark had gone. Their bond, once driven by mutual admiration and shared goals, had turned into routine, a business partnership, a family arrangement, a commitment held together by habit rather than heart. Pippa had fought hard for identity, for respect, for love, but sometimes even the strongest effort can't revive what's already slipped away. Their story isn't about failure, it's about reality, about how even the most perfect-looking marriages can slowly unravel behind closed doors, and sometimes the bravest thing to do is to keep smiling anyway.